Hi. So what I'd like to show you in the beginning of this DVD is that working from this rough marker sketches done on a single paper. So this will be probably work for early stage in the production. One sitting probably takes about 2 to 3 hours. Just getting this drawings done, actually done on about 10 by 15 inch paper. So it's not that big. So you see four different types of building here. I'm going to trim out like three different buildings and put them on an actual painting background. And it's going to be really quick and rough. So this particular building on the right top side. Okay, so this building has um, close to kind of triangle profile. However, it didn't really detail out how the bottom section of the building is like, sitting on the actual flat ground, and also what type of natural surroundings is it sitting in. So that's something I have to figure out. And I'm using the chalk brush. Chalk brush works the best in most of the cases because it ranges from rough rock texture sort of look to if I can uh, press hard, it gives me more like a flat marker shading kind of look. So within just using this simple chalk brush, I can get a lot of different edge control with this one, and try to um, draw connecting the basic shape that I have on the drawing and either extend it or modify it. Right now, just drawing out some of the plain shapes in front of the building, see how much the flat ground is gonna comes out and where the drop surface is gonna start. So a lot of it is more like a sculpting kind of sense. Um, I'm not really too concerned about color in this one. It's mostly make it easy to look and see what forms and shape this is. Because if you provide just a pencil drawing, I mean marker drawing to the client, um, I mean they can see what shape and the form and the design of the buildings. But however, if I put more like a neutral tone, kind of quick painting like this one, it's a lot easier for the client to see, to guess what the design of the building and what type of a structure is it. Okay, so keep working on the bottom section of the building. So here, most of the horizon line and the basic mountain shape in the behind the building is sort of suggested in this stage. Right now, I'm sampling the color, and the value is already there. And instead of more like cleaning up the lines, it's more like you know putting more weight on the structure lines. Because the actual production is better for me to provide uh, different sketches in a rough stage before I go into more of a polishing and rendering stage. Uh, Still a lot of things are up in the air to figure out in terms of materials and actual texture on the surface. However, this gives a pretty good idea about how big this place is going to be and how it's actually fitted into some of the rock shapes around it. There's a little bit of information on the lighting here. The center of the building has a kind of round dome shapes. There's one in the bottom, the ground level, and the second top has another one. So the lighting is not really accurate in this one, but however, getting that cast shadow on the surface suggests that it's actually the top section is coming out and covering the bottom dome shape. So here I'm continuing figuring out the rock shapes and going back and forth between the highlights and some of the middle value. But the way I'm treating this highlight is more like coming back with the white acrylic paint. So there's a lot of simultaneous thinking going on. And I treat it more like a line drawing, and at the same time, I'm using the fat, thicker brush and try to treat it like a acrylic painting. So design of the building, I'm thinking it could be built on sort of different planet. Mostly what's available for the building material was the rocks and the pure the metal sheet, and the building has been built up using some recycled materials. So right now I'm basically drawing an area that wasn't in the sketch. What's cool about this is because even though I'm doing the line work using the Photoshop brush, it still um, looks similar with the ones that's been done with the actual marker sketch. So having that consistent look, I mean, it's possible, and you can see I'm not really zooming in to get the fine lines or anything because the focus is in the building. So there's a lot of room for me to be a lot looser on the bottom section because that's not basically doesn't need to get the attention. So I'm pretty happy with the building design. The cool thing about this shape is repeating kind of flat dome shape, however, different size, and it's creating different cast shadow, especially the ones actually sitting on top of the other one. So yeah, I mean, it's fun to take your drawings and actually accentuate a little deeper by putting in the shadow and the light source indication. I really like doing that. However, I can't really call it this is a painting. This is more like extension of actual drawing uh, because I'm not really mixing colors or it's just basically continuing of carrying on the overall concept of the building. So from my working experience, I work very closely with the 3D environment team. Um, uh, Actually, I have to sketch out a lot of different things so that the modelers can look at it and then start building in 3D. When I show a lot of concepts to the director and art director, sometimes I have to communicate the mood and the color and lighting, uh, which doesn't really need to have a solid like a line drawing of the building. However, that moody, cool, like high level painting is not really what the modeler actually needs. I mean, they will need to look at it and figure out the overall mood and whether the place is actually in the bright setting or is a kind of underground, more like Hades environment kind of deal. But however, there's so many assets has to build, especially in some kind of fantasy setting games. It's a building has to be drawn to figure out the shape and design, and every building has to look different, that kind of thing. So a lot of times I focus on these quick line drawings that are clearly explaining the shape of the building and how it's put together. By looking at it, you can almost figure out how many polygons it will take. I mean, that's kind of exaggerated, but because a lot of times the modelers, they come to me and say, see, so this line drawing is awesome. I mean, I can go from this alone. And what they're looking for at this stage is not really a color painting or a cool like rendering of entire scene. So this is something I learned from the experience. If you have some of these quick sketches in your portfolio, um, surprisingly, actual the production team is really like to see these kind of things. So here's my first attempt, and I'm going to move on and work on the other two sketches that I like. And it's going to go through a pretty similar process. However, there's a slight the problem solving in terms of drawing the environment and finishing up the actual drawing and the parts that I don't like. And and now it's a good time to erase if I wanted to, and flip it and copy and paste it. All those cool Photoshop trick would be very coming helpful in this finishing up stage. Okay, here we go again. This building, to me, it has a little bit more interesting form, fitted kind of shape. It almost looks like a helmet, or almost feels like a character to me. Here, what I did right now is actual sketch. Even though it's got sort of cool things going on, I didn't like that front top section. So I took sections from my other sketch and lasso it out and then move it in and then sort of paste onto this sketch. This one has a sort of major problem with the perspective because I intentionally drew that sort of a middle belt thing, but it's not like straight. It's kind of like going across from the wheel shape to the right side. That one is really confusing in terms of doesn't make sense, I guess. Even though this is like kind of put together with using junk materials. So, I mean, as long as I know that, I mean, it'll stay back in my head right now. Okay, I gotta get to that part. I gotta come up with a better solution for that. So right now, making that little more like a bird kind of beak kind of shape in the front, just to give it, you know, it's not just a round kind of building. It also got a little bit of characteristic. So here are actually detailing out some of the underneath portion of this front profile shape. So still drawing, still designing. This building could be not like the first one. This could be more like a military compound. Maybe this has a potential of transforming to moving vehicle, things like that. A little more unfinished surface. You can see I try to draw like a patchwork of different metal plating. However, how this building is sitting on the ground, on the shape is more like sitting on the hill. That alone is already give it. This could be more like a guarding post kind of building. Eventually, it'll split open and some kind of moving vehicle can drive out from the center or flying plane. So continuing with the bottom section. And working with the highlights, however, it has pretty simple flat drop down surface. Because right now it's just what I'm trying to sell is the design of the building to the client. And probably when I come back to finish it, our polishing stage, probably use some photo textures or some custom brush to define more like a rock surface at the bottom. Maybe it's not a rock. Maybe it's just a stone, kind of like, you know, surface is treated more like a solid, smooth drop surface instead of rough rock shapes. So as you can see, just being pretty busy, the sampling the values and work on a few details. You know, what has to come out, I'll probably bring it out a little further out. Just a fun little building. It'll be interesting to figure out the entrance and how the interior is going to look in this one. Kind of post-nuclear sort of apocalyptic environment. Survivors, they grab all these scrap metals to build this. However, the main inside machinery is not a house. It's actually moving war machine kind of deal. So not knowing that, and once this building is done, people come in and start using it as a guarding post. But eventually, by going through correct procedure inside, the military machine is actually start functioning, and this turns into moving vehicle. That's kind of like thing that I have in my head right now. So this is sort of my favorite thing to work on. It's just a cool shape and not too far in the future. However, something we can relate to by looking at the signs and actual details on the surface. So definitely working on the highlights on the cracks. That's very important. And putting some shadows under flat signs and things that put on the surface. So I keep drawing. Yeah, this part that have had some issues when I saw it after I scanned it. Right now I'm trying to make it work, make it a little thinner, and probably the ending part. You know how I had more cracks and lines in the bottom left side of the belt in the center, and the top section has a flat surface, and that could be, and also by going through this painting stage. Yeah, here I'm trying to make it instead of belt and it's straight out, so it's actually fitted more with the horizontal line structure of the building. So I think that was pretty good treatment. How it doesn't feel like it's slapped on and doesn't feel secure. By seeing some of the white highlights I'm putting in, maybe this could be actually snow uh, or frozen ice. That would be kind of cool too, kind of expedition post for some higher gun military kind of guys looking for a hidden treasure or save the human race. Okay, so cleaning up the edges right now, pretty quick. Spent about 30 minutes to painting this guy. So right now, haven't decided. The bottom part could be either rock or ice, but the way I'm detailing the surface, I think it'll be more appropriate to have a ice surface mixed with some of the rock sitting underneath, inside the rock. So there will be cool lighting bouncing from the surface. And sort of how I explain why there's an open gap in the front right section. Maybe that's how like supposed to pour out the hot steam, the water, or something like that. Okay, so as an artist, I well, often I hear you only show your best work, but I wasn't like that from the very beginning. I didn't try to have any secret. I mean, what I can do is what I can do, and some of the work I'm not even proud of. But however, it's better to show and get feedback or listen to what other people has to say. Um, and also because it's being worked on some of the projects that are taking years to complete, so I kind of gave up to start choosing what I need to show and what I don't want to show, because every day production days, you do. Sometimes you work on a painting for hours, and sometimes you work on a painting for a couple of weeks. But over a couple of years of a production cycle, you end up with so many different things you created, and I can't really say what's more important than the others. So here, I try to share what I think I'm fast with, and something works out for me in terms of the process. And this is one of the things I wanted to show you. So let's move on to the third one. Okay, so here let's work on the last sketch for initial concept sketch. So out of four, this one I had in my mind, wanted to create something in the water. So this one is getting inspiration from one of those offshore oil rig floating out in the sea. So you can see the bottom bubble section kind of shape eventually become like crashing wave, like crashing into the support structure. So there's enough height from actual where the buildings are built onto the platform, and there's a supporting structure going into the water. So I'm crafting the vertical proportion in this one, thinking it'll be cool to show more of a sky. Very overcast, it's like nighttime. So choosing this particular blue, just wanted to make this a little more fantasy color rather than kind of cerulean blue. Has a little green to it. This is more like kind of fancy version of blue. Okay, here I'm adding highlights on the wave. So here I'm continuing drawing with chalk brush. So overall midtone value is laid out, so it's time to hit on some highlights and make some of the forms stand out more. So pretty much like drawing is most of this process, even though I'm changing the brush size. So some of the marks becomes more like brush marks, but basic idea behind this is looking at the pen layout that I have and either adding highlights next to some of the forms or continuing the line, and some of the shape separation requires more thick lines, so I'm changing the thickness of lines. So probably like working on the same layer for a while. I'm adding this behind structure, just hinting that there's a lot bigger oil rig is behind it. Maybe this is actually a moving platform. It sort of has the thin extruding out the gun shape in the front. Gotta do some cleanup because some of the marker marks are showing through. So here you can see I have this random shapes at the top. Some looks pretty good, some looks just kind of feel awkward. However, before I start doing more editing, it's just making sure some of the details are not too competing with other details. So very simple, like quick separating, getting the different size of waves. So these quick paintings are good for communicating your ideas to the game director. The first thing we do is like, getting our head around what these big locations are, and it seems like this on water, like ocean oil rig kind of thing becomes a kind of favorite choice for level design for some of the AAA titles. It's dramatic, you get to like kind of adventure out to the ocean and you get to this out of nowhere kind of thing. So these techniques are pretty quick way of getting your ideas down. Put some mood and getting the scale so you can communicate your idea with the director. I'm still using kind of old painting method for this one. I figure a lot of cool digital painting tools are available online. Sometimes we don't even do any line work and go straight to the painting, which is fine, I do that all the time too. This is kind of like going back in time. However, I remember talking about a learning curve, and I probably the most people same thing, but in the beginning of the career, when you start working in the industry, first 3 years, 2 years, I think that's when your skills are really improving, because you're starting from pretty much the bottom, so you're more acceptive and you're more you get easily inspired by the actual working environment, and that's when you really can manage your time well, and then fully learning all the things in the production. And then this production in the game studio, because there's a good side on working as a contract freelance, and there's another good side working as corporate the artist, which I've been working for Sony for a little more than 10 years. Now it's like my everyday schedule is a little different. It's because I have to manage a team. I have less time sitting down and actually doing work. Sometimes it's really frustrating because I need to get better. It's this ongoing goal to be a better artist.
but is it in terms of getting better with the technique, or is it as overall as an artist? Um, I know that like you only can do what you know. So if you really educate yourself, learning about colors and lightings and how things work in the nature, then you could see more in your painting, and you can always try to make it apply all the rules, work in the nature. But if you're sitting in the office, you know, that's what I need to do more. But I'm more like relying on my imagination, and you can see right here, it could look cool, but in a real setting, it's kind of lights are all everywhere and kind of spotlight on the surface. There's no sense of direction of light. However, it's just my painting style too. I work pretty fast, and it's just getting the idea down. It's more like priority in this process. So here, adding more structure at the top. Instead of thinking more like just how do I make this more like cool design and cool shapes, I was working with the art director and the game designer over the years. I often like try to direct my design to more of a level design layout. So, for example, like having this tall vertical part would be more like that could be eventually the character has to get up to the top, and somehow that's where you start doing like the puzzle. The mechanism gets started, and the middle panels are actually the ones that you're actually controlling, that kind of thing. With a high level stage, you have to kind of think about the design that way. So what is this part? What is that section that I'm drawing has anything to do with the activity of the character and the progression of gameplay. And also like while I'm sketching in the one direction and one dimension, but I have to think about on the other side, and what is the view from that side, and how it's gonna stage different gameplay from looking at from the other side. So it's a lot of fun. It's definitely game industry has still fairly young age individual working. Well, everyone's getting old. When I started, it's mostly single, and we started work late and we go home late. Sometimes people start up at 11 and go home like 8, 9, and we took the crunch overtime to be like sort of like it's natural for us. But now it's different. It's like over 10 years, everyone's starting a family and kids. It's important to be home early. So things are changing. The game industry is changing and evolving. But what I'm really curious about is how people's lifestyle will change, and that's pretty much what's gonna dictate the gaming industry. It's what people will prefer over certain type of the presentation. So it's also exciting. If you work on a successful title, then your artwork is actually eventually comes alive and will be in hand of millions of people worldwide. And I was pretty fortunate with working with a successful studio. So here I'm touching up some of the atmosphere final touch, and yeah, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to demonstrate some of my humble technique. I mean, it's not really fancy, but it's sort of kind of summarize my design approach and how I, without like rendering a lot of things, how I skip through those rendering time, and how quickly get to the presenting initial ideas. So there's a lot of things that comes to play. I think one of the most important thing is understanding the perspective and understanding the value working in the shot, especially environment concept, and putting the right value to create atmosphere is very important, and you need to have a good eye to do it, and good understanding about lighting, and most importantly, how to put together in constructive form using perspective. So, and then, of course, that's my weakness of sort of pushing it to the final push to get it like completely beautiful rendered image, and which is I haven't demonstrated this, but I hope everyone's enjoyed this and move on to the next chapter. Thank you. Hi, so here we're looking at a new sketch, Street View game concept environment drawings. This was done for a previous DVD using ballpoint, fine ink pen, and marker. So right side has a vertical wall, almost like going straight up to the sky. So that'll be interesting to model as a facade. This particular drawing will be used for another DVD. I think it's going to be a game asset environment modeling and texturing, which will be created by one of my coworker, Nate Stevens, the lead environment artist. So with that in mind, I had a brief conversation with him, and I told him I'm going to create this sort of sci-fi industrial, more like Fallout / like first-person shooter type of game. So you can see there's not really one single thing repeating on the left side and right side. However, I try to put as much as interesting shapes so that he can sort of pick and choose for his actually modeling the demonstration. So I designed the left side more open. You can see compared to right side has a straight facade. Left side is pretty much open up. This building structure, they're not really lined up in a one single line. So there could be a good place to place objects and pick up items and stuff. So after I put a sort of suggested value with the multiply layer, I'm working on a lighten layer with the same chalk brush, sort of deciding where the highlight should be. In the center ground, you can see there's a cast shadow coming from left to right, and I'm not really explaining where this cast shadow is coming from because it could be coming from outside of the frame. Here I'm quickly selecting the outside for sky selection. I had to create this sky selection. That way I can easily airbrush out the sky colors. So you can see with the selection in it, I can come back with the same chalk brush. However, sort of suggest there's a blue sky space behind the arch gate, and then also left side. So now I invert the sky selection, and that automatically becomes the selection for the building part. So working on a middle value, try to push the background object. In this case, arch gate should be pushed back a little further back. So I'm now checking on some overlay layer to sort of lay out quick color palettes. So just thinking that even though this is industrial metal and more modern concrete materials, however, this has been aged and been quite used, so it will appear some rust color and brown kind of aged metal look. So I'm choosing this sort of warm yellow, brown, ochre kind of color, with trying to mix it with some cool reflection colors on the surface. So here I'm trying to lighten up the sky a little more, and since enough middle value in the building is sort of built up, now you can see how entire image starts to become a little dull and dark. So I'm pushing the sky value a little lighter, so you can see the high contrast and seeing the building as a strong silhouette in the center section. So you can see I'm picking up some of the blue and cool bouncing lights. that I have as a big airbrush mark on the left side. I'm picking those cool colors and sort of bring that in as a highlight section too. So there's like random sci-fi shape design there. However, most important thing right now is editing the form and keeping the ones that actually important and sort of going over and cover up some of the unnecessary lines. So if I try to keep all the line work that I have on the sketch right now, end result will be way too busy. So even though all the marking and details are pretty cool as a drawing, but when you start the painting, you have to compromise, try to tone down some of the business and unnecessary marks. So it's mostly editing at this stage. The foreground is pretty interesting to paint because I want to have as much as reflection. So even though the actual building is old and rust and kind of abandoned, that doesn't mean the floor or ground section is completely like raw dirt or the sand, soil. It's more like it still has a hard surface, and somehow it's still reflecting some of the images from the top. So continuing editing and cleaning some of the edges and going over some of the lines and highlights. And even though you don't see it, it's still the selection is being turned on, so I can easily working on the edges of the selection area. So basically sampling colors that's already been painted, and even though ground plane is broken up into interesting random shapes, and some planes are actually lined up, some are kind of pushed up a little higher, so you'll have different intensity of highlights on it. So I'm thinking like the floor could be frozen ice, so it's not really that'll give it interesting climate, suggesting this could be reflections on the ice surface, and then explosions and all the stuff could have a really cool color. And left side, flipping an image and checking the composition here. Looks like left side top portion is kind of to cover too much. So this could be interesting section to explain how thick is the wall and how heavy this the varicate kind of wall thing is. So this is more like a quick sketch rather than the environment rendering. So probably a half day, 2-3 hours pencil layout based on the thumbnail, and then to bring it in Photoshop and quickly put the value and some color suggestions. That's what I'm trying to achieve in here. So I'm editing the top section. I can still change the design as I paint. With the same zoom window, I'm just going around and sampling the colors and values and keep fixing the drawings. I mostly emphasize highlight area and the shadow and reflections. So this type of drawing is good to communicate the form and the shapes to the modeler. Doesn't have much realistic photo textures on them. However, it's more like how the form is facing which side and what kind of curve they have and how it's built upon which shape. And just for suggesting what could be possibly happening in the background, I'm adding some different silhouettes, suggesting there's a lot more buildings and structures laid out in the background behind the wall and behind the arch gate. There's a lot more can be done, especially when you move into rendering phase of this particular drawing. I mean, you can see that inside the arch opening, I was trying to define some of the tall building silhouette has a different top portion, and that alone could be like separate painting. However, at this stage, it's important not to zoom in and start figuring out what small tiny shape is. The first, because of this time issue, and then it's always better to provide as many as different options to your client before figuring out surface textures and actual So overall colors and look of this particular illustration has a little bit of a comic book kind of feel to it. I think it's mainly because of not having a wide range of gray color, either saturation color or just a flat gray. I didn't use a wide range of gray colors, so it's taken away from a realistic look. You know, I mean, it's just different painting, different style. My main focus in this one is how do you come up with this flat wall that are interesting, but how these put together, and just help the modeler to explain how different shapes are patched up. Still working on the same chalk brush. Now I'm adding some lost highlights in the further background building and carving out some of the silhouette shapes around the arch. So there's no need to turn on the selection layer this time, because I'm actually changing the outline of this structure. So even though the building in the background appear to be the flat gray value, but they still have, it depends on the material surface, how the surface is going to bounce it off highlights. It will have some sort of different value of light that are separating the form. So getting in this flat gray area on the left side, working on the highlights, you can see just touching up the highlights. And then once it gets too busy, and pull back and coming back with a big airbrush to sort of tone down. And this open area is sort of suggesting there's a liquid kind of things floating out. Maybe that's how you start to form some of the ice surface coming from the left. So here I'm choosing some more saturated orange, especially under the arch. So area would be getting more saturation would be the spot right next to the big shadow. Okay, so once I have enough form rendering on the small shapes, it's time to sort of grouping some of the values and work on the more flash area. So here, obviously, some of the metal pipes and tubes. I'm trying to bring up some highlights on them, and all these tiny like light bulbs and the plating. Area that I'm lassoing out right now is more like a glass, like a neon display kind of deal. So I'm selecting all these hotspot together using Shift and Option key, and then adding some intense glow lighting inside of this lasso area. So that will bring back to a more sci-fi, it's kind of LCD display. So definitely the technique that I'm process that I've been showing you here is sort of being developed as a kind of old style, old school in a way. However, it'll be completely all drawn out first and then color. So it definitely has different approach and different complete look than um, sort of painting using the texture brush and photo textures. I think it'll be the more better result when I combine those two together. That way, my work has a little more distinct look and hopefully has a more a stronger voice. So here I'm still correcting some of the drawings. Here's some of the electric circuit and some of the wiring. Those tiny light bulbs. I'm kind of painting it with raw yellow just to separate, showing that it is emitting different dense light. Still touching up some of the dark area, and because some of the form and shape gets lost as I paint darker shading over on them. So yeah, it looks pretty good. However, there's some of the blue and spotlights that just doesn't make sense. So instead of taking it out, I'm actually sampling this blue and kind of apply it to the bigger area, so it doesn't look like the small section is sprayed into blue color. What's cool about this environment is I don't know how this some of the box screen monitor either is built into the wall or actually standing as a separate display. It could be cool visual with some of the reflection on the eye surface. So final touch is kind of pushing back the middle value architecture, such as the one that actually is standing in the center, the arch, tower, gate. So here what I'm doing is I'm actually adding a thicker, heavy framework. So just kind of like bring everything within this looking glass, kind of looking window, round oval frame, because one of the core shadow or cast shadow on the left side is sitting in a kind of curve. I'm trying to bring it in as a round circle composition framing. So this assignment was pretty fun. So this could be good for taking it to more realistic rendering. But you can see there's so many things that are kind of made up, not really. They look like some different molding metal construction parts put together, especially on your left side. So figuring out different rust metal texture for each shapes could be pretty challenging. However, I assume that because of display light, if that's turned on and has a very strong light coming from that display, then probably the surrounding texture would be pretty toned down. Okay, so here it is, a quick strip paint over of a game environment. Okay, so we're gonna start working on this castle drawing. This one has slightly different, more like a whimsical kind of animation shape design. First, I'm trying to find a good frame, taking the drawing in and positioning it where it's not really too centered. It's a little bit to the left, and clean up the bottom drawing so I can either place it on the clouds or some kind of mountain shape. So strictly working on multiply layer, just a pure gray, because the drawing alone it's really hard to get the sense of scale, and it's necessary to sort of put some sort of atmospheric touch, since this vertical building is actually coming out through a cloud. So this would be more like a fun fantasy concept. So building up the layers of cloud shapes. Basically, how I look at clouds is a big round organic shapes that actually has highlights and the shadow at the same time. I'm putting some around this more abstract background, just sort of like crescent moon kind of cutout shapes. So trying to experiment how this odd form of a cloud shape can be worked out in this composition. So changing the brush size, going back and forth with the wide shape and very thin, fine highlight shapes. So this is painting like clouds in a pretty, like almost like landscape painting in this stage. Not so much restriction, any kind of shape is possible in the sky. So slightly pushing out some of the highlights on the cloud's form before it gets too dark with adding too much middle value painting. So some of the scan image can look a little it's necessary to bring it in Photoshop and pushing out the contour of the building. You can see I drew straight on the angle. However, because of the perspective, even though the building is way further away, however, the top portion should follow the contour because we start looking up to the building from the center on. And we try to add some front, another architecture. It's just a small portion of it, but it just gives a more interesting view, as if we're actually looking from other building. Now start to add some white highlights on the cloud part. Before I even use too much of white as painting the clouds. So try to wait and see the surface of the building, how light this should be. So even though it has a sort of fairy tale kind of signature silhouette, but actual form of the surface, it has a it's kind of like steampunkish kind of tube surface and like a metal, shiny metal surface. So it's around the front building portion that I have, touching up some of the highlights in there as well. So the top section has a different big mass of clouds in front of this crescent shaped clouds. So anything besides the building, I'm seeing it as more like composition shapes. So still working on the same chalk brush. Here I start to add some greenish, neutral green tone. Start branching out some color options here. start adding some the color. Here I'm trying to keep this greenish yellow as a main color scheme. I'm trying to sculpt out, try to have a pretty impressive front gate kind of design here. You can see the bottom of the castle actually, you can see it continuing down behind this flat cloud line. So suggesting that it's a lot bigger than what it is. We only see the top portion of the castle. And of course the actual building material, whether it's gold or bronze, it's coming in with a little warmer brown tone. So I have been using this line work painting. Um, I probably used the most in the early career when I was doing the RPG projects such as Final Fantasy. That's when I start working with this illustrators from Japan, and everyone had pretty tight line work. Especially we used to call it map, which is a game screen. Back then it was a pre-rendered background, so it's not real-time environment where you can freely look around the camera. It's more like a set backdrop 2D image, but it looks 3D because of the rendering and some of the nerve rendering, modeling, not polygon. Anyway, the illustrators from Japan, they were using this mechanical pencil to do this. I think easily over 500 different maps, and that's when I had to sort of follow the style. I mean, I didn't have to, but I found that that was pretty practical and fast. So that's when I start train myself to put as much information in a single. It's not even a big paper. It's almost like 8.5 by 11, just letterhead bond paper, and I had to spend a good amount of time to be comfortable with the line work and get it uploaded by ArtDirector, and then I start paint. However, working on a different project after that, I start doing more painting approach. However, sometimes I do this mix and match between the project paintings, and especially when I have to quickly generate the shape concept so that the modelers can because once area is established in terms of colors and lighting and just the overall aesthetic of the locations, and there's a lot of shape design and modeling has to be done within that section. So it's more of giving the correct information, so how things are put together, and some of the props and puzzle elements that actually has to animate, and those things I quickly generate with using this line drawing and some of the value paintings. So here I'm adding some background silhouette buildings in the background. So it's not just a single building, there's multiple buildings. It's kind of like city in the sky. So here we're working on some vertical structures, and then there's some clouds actually traveling through between these vertical buildings in the background. So here, trying something kind of unnatural. Actually, this could be a upside down building, but what it is actually the bottom shape of this castle. So it's a really vertical shape, and I just added this just for the to break up this open space on the right side, so just basically for composition breakup. However, yeah, I mean the buildings are actually floating in the sky, so why not? This another one is actually you're looking at the base of the building, but it looks like it's actually upside down, but it's actually the bottom of the shape. So, so working into this crescent cutout portion of the cloud. So my main challenge when I do these paintings are I always check in with myself. Is this something you have seen before or something's already done? It's difficult to come up with a completely original concept nowadays. So many IPs being developed or already made or somewhere. I mean, some of the projects we haven't even seen. We only know like what's popular or what we can see. However, there's so many different artists and production house all over the world. It's almost impossible to come up with your own outline of the concept. So if you summarize your concept into 2 or 3 keywords, you fall back to something already done already. Like look at this one. It's just like, well, it's kind of like kind of steampunk, but it's like very surreal fantasy, and also it's floating sky. Um, that sort of things are combined together. It sounds like very cliche. However, as long as you are aware of it, and every time you try to make a mark or the shape design, you start to try to always push and think about what could be added onto this flat image once it goes to production. And those are things that you can suggest. I mean, it could stretch out from the soundtrack to actual lighting animation, or it's just things that can possibly move and can withdraw kind of awe moment from the viewer. So it's not just the making a flat image illustration. I try to think about all other things, so see it as actual moving pictures in my head, and that's the only way I can slowly pull myself out of thinking like, oh, okay, this looks like I've seen this before, or you know, I'm not succeeding, and it looks like some movies I've seen like 5, 6 years ago. And the using navigator window is pretty helpful because you have a second window, and almost like looking at it in a smaller thumbnail size. So you don't get you see the small changes you're making it. You also see it real time on the navigator window, and that's always a good way to check your composition and the value. And some area might turn into a little busy or kind of like conflicting with the other area surroundings. So it's good to always check with your navigator window and open it up in the decent size, so it's not too small, not too big. However, you can look at it as a more thumbnail view. Okay, so I had to flip the image upside down so I can paint on putting details on this upside down castle part. So mainly defining the sections that put together. However, still carry on this old kind of medieval castle kind of top section design. Still sampling colors from the paint areas that I already painted. So I'm trying to regroup some of the color. So right now, these colors are kind of going everywhere. Some open pocket, the light is coming through between the clouds. So using this brown warm tone, let's see if I can have a little more monochromatic warm color scheme. However, this design itself is it's kind of fun, an animation kind of castle design. So I'm allowing myself to use some intense saturation colors. So top clouds are actually some dark value colors, and lights are coming through. From here on, pretty much detailing the surface design of the castle. So even though there's some indication of details with the line work, um, I'm coming back and actually redrawing some of the detail shapes. This stage can go like hours and hours if I wanted to. However, finding where it needs to be rendered, where not, is I guess it has to come from a sort of I guess experience. So that you don't end up just noodling the image for hours and hours, and when you zoom out, you don't really see the much greater impact. And that happened to me a lot of times. So not too much, but just enough to see some of the forms and shapes to make sense to me, rather than just busy construction lines everywhere. So for this sort of fine-tuning, rendering, I like to use the flat shape brush. There's a lot of horizontal line um, drawing that I'm doing underneath the flat surface. So this particular shape of brush is perfect for getting the pointy ends and lines that usually come very straight. So just pull out, checking to see if I didn't make it too busy. So as you can see, there's an interesting building. The method is being done on this building, even though it looks, it's kind of like medieval traditional castle kind of profile, but actual surface is like made out of a bunch of different irregular patterns of metalwork, almost like steampunk kind of look. So here I'm coming back with the highlights on the clouds. Yeah, I still want to keep that sort of crescent moon kind of silhouette. So using the lasso tool, and then sort of blur out the edges and working on some top section, the highlights, the bottom part of the clouds layer. So again, I'm not really explaining cool trick or painting techniques. Uh, it's just getting the line work, design, figure out solid, and lay it on the paper, scan it, and then the painting is pretty much straightforward. I've been creating different layers, but mostly just going back and forth between overlay, normal, and multiply. And I didn't really have a masking done for the objects and building structure. I like to keep it pretty loose. And this one was pretty different than other paintings in this DVDs because, except the building, everything else around it is just abstract shapes. But how it's formed and laid out inside of this space, I guess that's something could be worked out in the 3D, especially how the cloud is going to travel across the image and how the cloud is going to turn around this connecting the top to bottom and middle section. So working on the final touch, some lighting, poking through the clouds, and some of the dark shadow in the middle section of the building needs to be sort of lighter. That's creating too much contrast. So here is the sort of quick take on a castle in the cloud city. Hi, so here we start on one of the early production pitch sketch that has been done in last DVDs. This particular section is, I call it Canal City. I'm thinking maybe a mixture of Western architecture, especially the bottom section of the architectures, built heavy marble and stone base work, and somehow the Chinese, the golden era of Cheng Dynasty, adapted the method and end up start building sort of vertical tall structure. Not like the common Eastern architecture, they're more flat and more focused on roof the design. So here I'm cropping the scan portion of the sketch. This is about 6-inch wide pencil sketch. So, I mean, it looks fine, but once I start zoom in and like working on the details, I might have some rough, loose line work. So there will be challenge to either hide those marks or maybe take advantage of the raw the pencil strokes. This is actually drawn on some the paper. The first thing I do is I create a multiply layer and decide what overall tone canson paper that I want to start painting on. As I mentioned earlier, I'm kind of old school, traditional art training student, so I like to keep it that way. Even though I work digitally, I want to think this is a canson paper. Has some pencil drawing that I have done. I use lasso tool in many ways. And right now you can see the reason I create this lasso section is I want to just draw in shadow and then also finish the top portion of a roof design. You can see the top portion I added another roof, so it's sort of does a two-tier roof. Actually, lighting is behind this building, whether it's coming from the sky or, I'm thinking this could be totally fantasy setting. Maybe having candle in the major Chinese city, I mean, that's possible. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of the candle aqueduct system that been built throughout the China. However, I wanted to suggest this would be cool production pitch because you're going to see the vast miles of straight background, and then suddenly you start to have a gradually built vertical palace-looking city structure. So I'm still working on the same multiply layer. Before I jump into focus on the details, I want to keep the line work showing through. So here you can see how I using lasso tool to create this shape. So not only using it as a mask, I also draw a lot of shape with a lasso tool. Here I'm adding some inside lighting source. It's kind of mild, but later I'm thinking that's where you can. It'll be cool to actually look into this the portion where this novel the people are actually hanging out. So gradually building the values, the shadow within shadow. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable with this green olive kind of theme. Right now it could be a little saturated, but let's see how this is gonna take me to. So here I'm adding extra canvas space. I do this a lot because what you see on the paper, even though you feel comfortable in terms of composition and actual layout of the scene, but once you scan in and start seeing on the computer monitor, it starts to look a little different. I don't know why, but it probably has to do with thinking that you can change it. You can either extend it, crop it, tweak it. So I just use the freedom to almost like second arrange the scene. Here, right side, I'm basically adding more couple inches of space and finishing the building design. It's actually better this way, I think. It opens up the view more. You can see there, I marked the vanishing point a little higher than what it's supposed to be. There's a little bit of the loose kind of room that I can play with because I'm still, composing the scene, and it's just I'm the one actually making this shot. So the reason I made it a little higher, probably later maybe I can make the ground plane later further going away, or actually the ground plane is actually dropped, and where you see the horizon line is actually not horizon line, it's actually the drop down cliff or things like that. So it's an interesting combination. Left side, I didn't do the flat brush marks to skirt the architecture shapes. But the right side, I'm doing that. Here, I'm tweaking the window perspective. Reason I have this particular building don't have next building actually sitting next to it. That way you see the side of it. Because of that, seeing the window through there is another way of making the graphic design shape thinking going on here. Because that way, I looking at the window, and it's obviously this time of the day, the setting, you're gonna have some sort of lighting coming out from the window, so it'll be adding interesting design on that flat area. Same thing that I'm doing on the left side right now. That round sort of structure, actually the front of it has arch window. So it's all about shapes and the value. I think the value is the most important thing, especially when you do the environment. Value is how our eyes start recognize things working in the scene, especially atmosphere, and when you're dealing with this maybe more than miles away of open fast shots. I mean, matte painting is very important. Have correct value in each shapes in the scene. However, this kind of high pitch could be a little more stylized, a little more contrast, or a little more sort of artificial, just painting kind of value in there. To take that freedom. Okay, still working on the multiply layer. Even though it's multiply layer, but I'm working on one single layer so far. So I'm coming back with a lighter lighter color is light green. I guess I'm marking the trying to mark the highlight the surface that each building's surface that actually facing the light. And also sort of it's like a building a city block, and a little bit of defining the mountain silhouette there. So here I picked the blue. That doesn't mean that my actually top portion of the building is painted blue. I like to experiment with different colors without before I even think why it is there. Again, this is a very quick pitch painting. Usually the work starts around 9:30 at 10. That gives me about probably like 1 hour and a half to actually do some work before step out for lunch or have a meeting. So within that 1.5 hours, you can finish the pencil sketch and come back from lunch. That'll be about like 2 o'clock. And from there, you can just start painting. Definitely this has to be done within a day schedule. So starts from 2, probably like before 5, you should be able to do a painting. Because a lot of times, you're not really figuring out design at this stage. Design is already figured out with the pencil sketch. You can change it as you paint, but mostly minor tweaks, correcting the shape alignment according to the perspective. And that blue light on the further flat area, it's more like a suggested tone for me to like think about next step. Because before you don't see anything, sometimes you can't really think about next step. So you have to do something. That blue, if that blue is just like supposed to be water, then, and my gut feeling saying, hey, that'll be cool if there's a water, then that's how we will go. If that still screams out to me and saying it's too blue, doesn't work, I'll go back and change. So initially I laid out the color. I'm very spontaneous. Maybe that could be my weakness as well, because it'll definitely end up making this shot too fantasy. But again, the concept painting is all about bring everyone on the table and talk about possible way of making this interesting design and getting the correct value, or not value, but the subtle realistic lighting and color. That's mostly could be polished and taken care of after this stage. So we get to finally paint red roof. Now it's gonna start look like more like Asian architecture. So the close-up building, this one that I'm working on, should have most saturated color because it's closer. I'm sampling neighbor colors, local. That way it keeps me within narrow the palette and makes my work speed goes faster because I'm not sampling from swatches or color wheels. So for pitch painting, it's the front objects are definitely is worth spend time and adding like realistic the objects and shapes that attach to actual buildings, such as a pole, like a long like flag pole, things like that. However, the further the building in the background, even though you're not getting there and then actually, designing all that things, but however, when you actually show it to your client or your the game director, you should be able to describe, yeah, those buildings in the back, they're more have an overhang. It's create this big arch thing, and underneath is like marketplace. It's just you have to be in that as if like you're from this place. Because more you get excited about your work, everyone will have believe in your actual design. So here I flip the image to check the composition, looking at it from fresh eye. Right there, the walkway, the perspective there is slightly off, and it kind of bothers me. So just moving that to pulling the one side a little bit higher, so it matches the perspective grid, the guideline. So I mean the top, the lounge section for this the official people kind of gathering lounge area. It adds a very game or film storytelling elements there, because why we have this particular camera shot here. So maybe this is the intro shot to actually slowly zooming into that lounging area and lock into the conversing two people. Or actually this is a game shot where you know the view from different building, maybe sort of navigation idea, or how this intro angle, it's more like an intro to this new level. You should see this beginning of the level, and then you come back and there's will be lighting changes and color changes because the time elapsed. So again, when you first doing early production sketches, I was talking about how day 8 hours office work can be broken into, and it can be used. Say I come back from lunch and spend 3 hours, finish the painting. That's like 5 o'clock. And what could be done from 5 to P4, call it a day. Let's say I have a meeting at 5 and everyone looked at this and very intense, exciting like review, and I got out of so much information. Start to narrowing down, because it's not going to be just from one single person. The game director will put this in his personal or share folder, and lead designer, combat designer, and level designer, art director, they will look at it and just have to have a conversation. And a lot of times you get more information out of the things that you don't think about, things that you didn't think about, and could be running into a problem because of the technical issue, or the camera issue, or just simply it just conflicts with the other area because it looks similar, or it just doesn't fit in the story development. However, after the meeting, this is when you can spend, if you can spend another hour, and you can create another version where based on the feedback you get from your client, or you start jumping in, grabbing more reference, and think about next shot, think about another one that you can work on next day, or just doing the groundwork for the entire week. You can think about in your head, all right, today's Tuesday, so 3 more days, and probably I'm going to spend a couple hours just finding the reference and just scheduling my own week, the production, so you can have a good, efficient amount of work, and slowly taking everyone into the final goal. So that 3 hours will be very, very important after getting feedback, at least for me. So painting with the normal layer here, because if I keep working on the multiply layer, it's just image is gonna get darker and dark before it gets too heavy and dark image. I'm coming back with the normal layer and working the highlights. So you can you see I'm not really showing you some cool tricks or probably like everyone who's watching this DVD, they already know a lot of things that I've done here. Because I don't really have the cool tricks that I know. I just don't know many. It probably has to do with the me not keeping up with the new techniques, or when I started in the industry, which was yeah, it's like '98, working for Square. Back then, what's important back then was getting the correct information laid out, more like a layout. You know how like traditional animation had a layout artist does pencil designing shapes of rocks, trees, and you go inside of interior and have to design the furnitures. It's mostly layout sketches. So I had to do a lot of those. So painting is actually uh, just getting that information finished. So I haven't really developed my own way of finishing, getting the marketing quality of a realistic look. That's why you don't see many special tricks. And also, there's so many DVDs out there that talking about those particular techniques and the process of each artist, the beautiful work, how they do it. So I decided this DVDs. I just want to show how I can quickly create large volume of design and layouts. So I hopefully you guys find this interesting. Just a pretty old school method. Just however, I never lost uh, the excitement or the feeling that I'm actually painting instead of the collaging and putting the shape together. So I think that's pretty important. So here it is, Candle City. We're gonna wrap up this one here. So this is the way I can preserve the line work and quickly put value and the rough color comp on the layout sketch.
Hi everyone, my name is Cecil Kim. In this second DVD, I'm going to walk you through some coloring process. I'm going to take the initial sketch that were created from DVD 1 and I'm going to start coloring in Photoshop using very basic painting tools, using layers and how do I put in initial lighting information so that I can show it to my client, the art director, how I quickly turn 2D drawings into high-level concept paintings. So let's get it started.
Okay, so here I start designing rough shape. A couple options for this new location. So usually the first step you do when you design a environment for a game, the game designer or producers, they narrow down the first main areas you should explore. Usually the place has taken pretty important part in the story and also some of the boss fight, or player has to go visit a number of times so it'll appear throughout the game. So this particular design, I was thinking more like blending in more classical elements from the old classical buildings into some of the science fiction territory. So it'll be interesting mix, and I'm not thinking too much about defining the detail, and it's more like how do you describe this sketch? Aesthetic style could be, is it like hard, angular, very protected, or it could be more like more ornate and has a little bit of the constitutional look. Just finding different variations and being able to give your client a couple different choices. So right now I'm using a marker pen. I think it's a gray scale, about 6 or 4. And I'm using the felt tip part, slowly moving around so I can get different variations on thickness and lines. And just putting the base, and it looks like it's going to be sitting on the flat area, and going over some of the shadow section under a different structure, and roughly thinking the light source could be coming down from quarter top left. And I haven't put any windows, but you can start getting the scale of this particular building. I'm thinking this could be about maybe like 10 to 20 story high. So you can see I'm coming back with warm sepia. I think it's warm setup gray, pretty close to value than I just used. When I do storyboard, I use two different setup markers. For background purposes, more like cool gray, and then some of the figures and front objects, especially moving objects like cars, and some of the effects could be drawn by warm markers. So at least you're doing the drawing, but visually the color has a little bit of separating. It at least better what's going on in the scene. But when you do environment sketch, is I like to mix the two, just for the sake of just pretends I'm like painting a little bit too. So also the sepia look especially helps when you do more like old architecture drawings. So here I'm also coming back with a darker marker. You can see I'm mainly going over a shadow area where the roof and then some of the structures are hanging over the other structures, where usually that tends to create really flat, dark shadow in there. So it's easy to get caught up with the 2D flat abstract designs. And now I'm coming back and separating, really deciding, okay, what structure is in front of which one, and if this column is sitting in front of one next to it, and how the shadow is going to obscure the surrounding. So right now, and I'm applying that thoughts to it. So I think this sketch is play a little faster. I think I'm drawing pretty fast, and this is probably takes about 15 minutes. And here I'm using Sharpie, the fine point pen. So moving into almost the final touch. So acknowledging some of the laid out shapes and value in there. So basically I'm going over and doing the outlines, and also you can see in between form connection. And just at this stage, probably pretty much no-brainer, because all the design relationship was figured out the previous tone. So I'm basically taking it to a more finished, decent presentation look, so I can bring it out to the discussion table. I'm not professionally trained to use marker. I didn't have any marker training because I study fine art and illustrations. So I only use 2 or 3 value build up. So I don't know how to render super cool looking product or vehicles and shiny presentation, but I kind of understood what marker can be used in terms of figuring out the design sense. And I think great deal of it is, it's really forgiving. And I'm saying once you put down a rough shape, you can come back with a darker value, and second time you can edit it and you can make better judgment on it, third time, and then lastly you come back with the line work. This is where you can really pretty much without ruler, because there's already 2 or 3 lines you attempted to get the better shapes, and you're just tracing over it. And still a little bit of loose illustration look, so a lot of times I don't really use rulers unless you have to do a kind of a quarter view of stairs or something that you really need to have to figure out the spacing and the size repetition. But in this case, it's really fun stage because you are just responding to the abstract marking and indications you had it on the paper. So it's the some kind of storage tank or silo kind of thing on the side, and definitely at the top of the column has monument, iconic figure standing there. Okay, still going over, and then there could be a connecting bridge coming to the right, so suggesting that even though it wasn't in the description, you can add secondary layout suggestion possibly there's a bridge coming to the right, and your client would say, "Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe we can do some kind of cool explosion in front of it and have a reflection actually, have a bridge behind it." Or no, the bridge is not necessary because the place has a different connecting route underground. However, it's something to try. You can always, take it out. And before I wrap this up, I'm going over final shadow part touch. So if you squint your eyes, some of the shape has to read better, because bigger shape should have a bigger shadow. And relationship to the direction of the light. And this one is pretty overblown, but I'm guessing, it's coming from the quarter angle, like left, top left. So before I spend more time and noodling in details, just build up more framework and move on to the second option. So here, before I working on the second one, looking at the first one, I'm thinking completely on the contrary. This one can be more solid fortress kind of look, more angular. It's almost like blocky piles of, the shapes. Almost looks like an aircraft carrier for now, and it's easier to switch to different drawing medium just to get more fresh the contact feel and maybe the different line control. So just I can say this is a thumbnail. I mean, it's not to show the client, it's just to checking with your brain, saying like is that something you have in your mind? Is this working for you? Probably not. Then let's not go with direction. Just quickly communicating with yourself. And I like the one on the right, so it could be pretty challenging because it doesn't have iconic shape you read from it. It's more like a flat structure. So this one, I'm loosely figuring out how, especially this one is actually built on multiple tier, and clearly I want to have some sort of separation with the ground and the first tier. So just there's a little bit of I guess it's 1 point perspective on the left side of the building, and other than that, the front side is just mainly straight lines. The second value marker, same thing. Here start developing the shape separation. Yeah, the area working on right now, right there is there's a 1 point perspective, and then as you get to the top, there's more smaller building. This is actually something that's always stuck in my head. I think I cannot remember a particular reason, but I think it's Jerusalem or somewhere in the Persian territory. I remember seeing this beautiful sand fortress kind of castle. There's so many places that we don't even know, and they were there for thousands of years. And I always thought that, what if we just take that and turn it into more modern, apply to the modern building design, instead of making that as like some kind of cheap mall, shopping mall concept. Okay, so this one feels pretty good so far. Only downside to this one is doesn't have a strong characteristic, but maybe that could be the good. Maybe that's what client might looking for. Okay, so here I am defining the front facade shapes. Still working on the same value, but trying to mark down some of the small stuff on the front. And as I described earlier, I want to have a clear separation. It's almost like the the whole thing is lifted, so it has a overhang structures, and so between ground and the first tier has a completely different the shapes and designs. So here, going over with a little darker marker, separating the shapes and adding more shadows, receiving from the light source from the left. So this particular design has very simple box shapes built up. So it's important to have good separation with the shapes. So obviously the top portion, whatever the cube shape as a small building structure is smaller than the one at the bottom. And here's some random, almost like a tower kind of thing, separating. It's sitting on the left side. I tend to get too much into 2D detail design, and a lot of times I pull back, and when I'm done with the 20 minutes drawing, and then suddenly everything becomes too busy. That's my weakness, and it's even though I know that I sometimes do make same mistakes, because as for a person who actually drew this design, it kind of, I'm used to it as I draw, and I know what it is, but a lot of times when I show it to my client, they're saying it's a little too busy, can't really respond to a simple basic structure of this whole thing. So it's difficult because you're not really have someone reminds you when you do that. So over a period of time, you make same mistakes. Sometimes if you're more aware of it, some mistakes will go away, and naturally it doesn't exist in your pattern anymore, but new problems will come up. So it's a constant checking and fixing. So I think it's important to look at your drawing when you're done with it and say how much I dealt with my previous problem. Have I gotten better, or was I aware of it? So that sort of checklist thing is good for over a period of time. So we are here at final line work. It's using Sharpie, and this particular paper that I'm using is a ledger paper. It's a really thick, and I started using it because the weight of it is I end up keeping these drawings in my drawer, and it doesn't have those very smooth plastic feel of the vellum paper or tracing paper, and it still has those old sketchpad kind of rough feel to it, but actually is really made with the fine surface material. So here I'm going over some of very loose indicated shapes, and there could be a number of different ground elements. We can put it here, and getting the column shape. But again, it's not really trying to figure out what those columns are, and is that a chimney or is it actual building's top structure? It's basically just getting a quick sketch of different design solution for your client. And there could be fine details on the windows, and because actually when you build this in 3D, this small section of this entire structure is actually pretty big. So that's when you actually have to do actual production facade design drawings and material callouts. But this is like doing the groundwork for that, almost like throwing out overall map for the location. So any discussions regarding combat and platforming and actual navigation of this entire place, and also it will help director to sort of describe as, okay, bottom section for the civilians and maybe top section for a more novel residents, and this in between section has more secured middle class section there, things like that. And then here, sketching out some flying objects, possibly spaceship, was kind of a blimp, and going over some vertical lines. It is important to go over some of the structure lines, I should say base lines, mostly the horizontal vertical lines, and coming back with the darker felt tips and adding, I guess, more heavy shadow, so put some weight on this structure. So you can see on my second DVDs there will be quick coloring of these sketches in the Photoshop, but that's basically the same process. Instead of marker, I'll be using the Photoshop painting tools. However, it will be separated in layers and just adding more thin, darker values over laid out the base value. So this sketch took about probably like less than 20 minutes. Pretty quick. But just getting a rough idea out of the head and put on the paper. So here's the second option. Here, it's a slightly different approach from previous set of marker drawing. This time I'm using a very thin blue pencil. I think it's a cobalt blue. Same concept, just figuring out this main structure design, and whether this is some sort of command tower or storage building or just residential buildings. This time I'm trying to figure out different design shapes. It can be overall used for either residential or business or military and so on. But altogether, they should be somehow sharing at the same similar design direction. So sorry about this zoom out camera. You can kind of see I'm using the pressure sense to get the different line quality. Definitely, this pencil has a different physical contact feel compared to marker. And later in this second DVDs, I'll be painting some of these sketches and turn it into more painting with the background in it. So right now, I'm trying different silhouettes. Hopefully, I get to have one that I'd like to move on to the next step. This one has a little more of a science fiction profile. It doesn't have a straight separation. It's more of a curve. It's built up. It's almost like a big helmet kind of shape. It's a building. So again, similar approach with the marker. Instead, I'm just using the value, but using the pressure. I'll redraw the lines that are like, make it permanent. And secondly, adding shadow under the line so I can have clear separation of the shapes. The back connecting part, I have this sort of little more cracked kind of organic shapes. So continuing on detailing rock shape, interesting rock chisel surface details, and try to carry that onto architecture wall. This one start looking like more like some sort of a seashell kind of shape, which is pretty unique. One of the favorite artists that I really got influenced by was Roger Dean, the British illustrator and fine art painter. He used most of gouache paintings, but then he did the album cover for Yes and Asia during mid 70s to mid 80s. And in his fantasy setting landscapes, I often see his unique aesthetic, the design language. A lot of them looks like big mushrooms and seashell kind of shape, and I was so fascinated by it. Also, some of the stage design that you see at the Yes live stage, some of the cocoon shape and like transparent plastic like a seashell. He used his concept to make those props and actually set it up, spread it out on the stage. You can find it on the web. Third one, this one I'm trying to go back to traditional fantasy castle silhouette shapes. It's like long vertical tower, more like Disney-esque. The Sleeping Beauty kind of sharp tip and long support beams and stuff. So this one, first of all, I'm trying to find a good balance between 3 different triangles. So the center one being a main tower, and right under the tip, it's got little interesting carved out curves, and you can see within the overall silhouette, I start going in and breaking it into smaller shapes. As soon as I do that, I start adding some of the shadows. So deciding like which part is actually coming out more. So adding more details on the middle section here. So usually beginning of a working process is research stage is very crucial. Not only getting the information to work with, is mentally, I mean, as soon as you get assignment from your client, your motivation is at the peak level. And then spend another couple hours browsing web or looking through a book, and you start to seeing the better options for designs and some of the solutions that you haven't thought about, and then you get really motivated. However, this particular set of drawings you see on this paper, they are completely out of my imagination. And since I'm not doing this for a client, this is, I decided to just do whatever I like to do, which is pretty much showing what architecture and what artists that I like. Because I see a little bit of Antonio Gaudi architects influence here, and also Roger Dean, and some of the British fantasy the artists like Brian Froud, who did Dark Crystal, and so on. So I should say this particular technique or drawing style that I'm doing here would be good for book illustration or sort of children book illustrations, fantasy novels. So these are, I mean, your form rendering is a little stylized, and also I'm dealing with a lot of shape design. So you can see the bottom of this castle, I sort of made it very graphic shapes. And I'm making sure that contour line on the rocks, they are somehow connected, and by curving it in some solid section, I'm saying that that surface is actually round. It's like a figure drawing. I mean, figure drawing is like the Bible of art training. I think being able to capture what human form is doing within like 5-10 minutes, and being able to decide what needs to be foreshortened and proportion and all that thing is so many curves and thinking process you have to do when you do a figure drawing. So I think the all the logic and if you being able to do figure drawing really well, I'm pretty sure you can draw anything even better. The problem is when you're in school, you have to fight with the workshop hours, and you have to be there to practice figure drawing. But if you think it the other way, if you're out of school, and that's when it's difficult to work on your figure drawing, because you have to find the workshop, find the model, and pay for the workshop. It's even more difficult. So there's a few things that I regret, that if I go back to school, or if I go back 15 years before, when I was as a student, I should have just stayed in the workshop, drawing workshop, figure drawing workshop, when I didn't know what to paint or what to do. That's the best investment you can do as a young artist. Luckily, the studio I'm working for, Sony Santa Monica, we started having workshop, but still even that's difficult, because taking out 2 to 3 hours on the weekday schedule, it does slows down production, because more people get involved, and this meeting could be difficult to put together when everyone's coming back with the easels and drawing board, things like that. So here I'm going over with this round tip instead of a wide tip here. You can see it does a little interesting thing, because I'm going over a very thin, dry drawing over with the Aqua Vase ink, so it does kind of like blends it out and become more neutral tone. And most of the area I'm going with over is the contour line, the cracks and big rock separations. So I'm still keeping it pretty loose, because I know that I still have to scan it and then still edit it in the Photoshop. So I'm not too concerned about the lines going over, just making sure it still holds up the basic concept that I had, which was kind of whimsical, tall, Disney-esque tower looking. So continue working with a little darker value, and making sure a deep pocket has a more darker value inside. Still keeping it pretty loose. At this point, I'm not really concerned about the surface design. It's more like the separating the form and what kind of curve is used to construct this vertical structure. I mean, more and more people rely on a digital tool to complete their production concept. But I still find the sketching is so much faster than actually try to block this out in Photoshop. It has different effect, a different approach. You can't really draw lines in Photoshop. If I do the same thing in the Photoshop, I'll probably use the blocky chalk brush. So it's more like a carving out details out of solid gray shape, where this is more like a loose line work, and start dressing the skeleton structure of the architecture. So I'm going over with the darker value again. Again, this building will be interesting to design from the front, looking at this and figuring out top, front, and the other side. Because how I see it is not going to be symmetrical. and looks like looking at the top small roof section, actually this building is quite massive. Here's going over line work on this flying ship. Has a really interesting bean shape kind of stacked up. I don't know how this is going to fly, but then I'm coming back with the final outline work. So pretty much going over what's there already. Almost like the on the front of the cliff section, almost has an abstract pattern. And working on the first sketch. Start drawing the outline first. On the left side there, I'm thinking this one is more nomads, tents, or residential area, where bottom building is more like Tony Stark's that kind of penthouse kind of design, where this one is more natural rock, kind of rock carved out windows and dwelling is in there. So little figures. So this particular sketch, I started seeing more influence from Antonio Gaudi when I went to Spain, and I couldn't just believe what I saw as I walked up to the subway station. And once I got out of the station, the La Sagrada Familia was standing right in front of me, and it was probably the best thing I've done to myself. And pretty much himself, I think he was more like a concept artist too. The difference between us and him is he actually built and his concept into actual building or handcraft. Every inches, every corner of the building, design had a meaning and was telling the story. Not only the shapes, but he also was playing with the materials and the motifs to originate from natural form. So definitely the edges are more sharp and spiky it is. It takes away from obviously more cute look. This one, okay, sort of going over the finish touch. Let's give it a graphic treatment. Here's the second part of the drawing. Here, third part of the drawing exercise. Working on some thumbnails. Thumbnails for layout sketches. So pretty much after you pitch the main building or key location, let's say the meeting was successful and response was good, and kind of decide on which design was good to go with. And the second thing, you can get back on your working table and try to figure out what do we see from actual ground, eye level point. So whether this could be inspire story writers or level designers, just kind of get everyone's head around, have some sort of visual so they can discuss what type of scenario would be good for introduction, what type of scenario would be good for introducing first AI, so on. So this time I'm using a very basic office drawing tool, not even an art tool, mechanical disposable pen. I usually have a dozen of them stacked in the office supply drawer. So just getting the line down. The second one could be like a king's sort of shrine, the stairs leading down to the floor. Could be a good setup for the commanding scene, maybe some sort of ceremonial introduction. So this one, forcing myself to create interesting option for a backdrop layout. In this case, the spacing between columns are pretty off, and there's a thin one and there's a different base one and thick one. But however, I'm not gonna stop my creative process by trying to be accurate with the size of columns and stuff. It's more like getting the design language, whether this is going to be serious, heavy tone, or a little bit more fantasy, sharp point. A lot to do with the throne design, and also definitely the marble column has interesting marbling textures on. So the steps is actually flat and it doesn't have stairs, so probably why some sort of carpet. Try to come up with some sort of indication of a symbol or some kind of sign that could be related to the sovereign, the king, the ruler of this place. I'm adding the character in the front. So you can see overall line work is pretty light because a lot of values and push and pull will be done in Photoshop. This one I'm trying to capture outdoor exterior shot. You can see there's a little bit of a one-point perspective. However, the fence is not straight; it's actually curved like a rib cage. So we're using that kind of curvy lines as a main rhythm for the composition here. So this would be good exercise. One of the painting exercise that I had from Art Center was you paint interior, however the door is open. So you're looking from inside out. This is kind of same thing. If I close up the ceiling, then you're inside, but between the columns, you're looking out outside. However, this one I later open it up and try to put some kind of interesting tower. So the perspective is always the one first thing to figure out the composition. And it all comes down to 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective. However, depends on how you use the curves and lines. 1 point perspective could be turned into like 100 different options. And also what you see between these structures. You can see there's putting a little bit of horizontal and building structures on the horizon. So that definitely putting in the scope of this entire area that also worth exploring. So it'll bring up to the designers and they can say, well, it'll be cool if we see this location from here and clouds are obscuring, so forth, so on. This one is more like architecture heavy based layout. There's a dome structure in the front. It's a little off perspective now. And then in front of it, I guess because the horizon line is almost at the top of the frame, which meaning we're way above, looking down at everything. This could be a pretty dramatic shot. So there's a little arch door. And then the building on the left side gets close to the horizon line, so you start to see more of silhouette instead of you don't get to see the top portion of it. So here I'm trying to change the dome shape because it's a little difficult to get the perspective right. I'm actually changing to more straight line, flat wall buildings. So something like this kind of sketch is very helpful for level designers because it shows how to lay out the path for the platforming options, and it's not just the straight buildings. And you can see I'm putting it in front of a flat wall, so there's a little gap between the buildings. And then also connecting catwalk and bridges are always good to putting in. Okay, so here let's draw something bigger so I can put in more details on this one. Camera angle will be on the ground, eye level. So this is pretty much like what you're going to be seeing in the actual game. Setting is futuristic, rundown, street shot. Keeping the vanishing point center, low center, so it'll be pretty straightforward, standing looking out shot. However, right side of the wall and left side of the wall has a very different shape design. And between the right and the left side, you can see interesting arch, kind of door frame, and even the ground is not straight flat. And there's something else to explore here. Making the wall is a little more interesting by cutting in the shapes. So working with the light value marker. Just loosely indicating some of the structures that actually extrude out overhang. Could be a sign, holding the sign, or some kind of light. And the left side is, instead of making it flat, I'm actually making another the pathway is split in there. So it's quickly laid out lines, but how much do I see actual shape in there? And going back with some value. So again, looks like the light source would be coming from, pretty much coming from the top. I like how markers are doing this. When you're not beginning of the line and end of line, it does make this bigger marking points. So it's almost like has interesting construction look. I mean, science fiction is so well done by great designers the past few decades, and I don't know where my place would be in there. I try to come up with my own interesting look, but I don't know how other people will receive it. But for now, I'm just making sure that I do respond to what I like to see, and that's the best thing I can do for myself at this point. You have to enjoy the process first. That way, when you talk about your work, you have a slight tone of a passion in there, and you can convince your clients better. If you try to to always try to do like the best design or something that people haven't seen, which is good to keep in mind. But if that becomes too much of a stress or too much of a blocker in your process, then your work is not going to be as strong. And you do start fall into design routine, especially when you work on a project too long, say 2 years or 3 years, or the project itself has a very distinct design sense. Then you start to adapt and get used to it. And when you're done with the other project, you still carry that with you. And it's always good to change your drawing medium or drawing the different process to break up the pattern. So here I'm touching up, not going over everything. Once again, the major keynote in the composition lines. So knowing that, I will be going over darker value, which will sort of have fixing the mistakes. So I'm just drawing fast, get the work done, listening to favorite music. Okay, I do like the center arch thing, how it looks like an arch, like a medieval shape. But then there's a couple interesting silhouette of buildings sitting on the top. That's kind of something new. You know, as long as you developing new things in your each paintings, not repeating the same thing over, I think that which is a good thing. And you never know, that will end up being bad design or something you'll be thinking of. So also another thing, what's making sci-fi, what's making Seed Me to kind of look is in the angle of the line. If you everything keeping straight, vertical, horizontal, rarely will respond to modern design. But however, between those vertical lines, if you start adding diagonal lines and the round curves, things like that, it start read as futuristic design. So you can see on the right side, they're pretty much straight lines, but then there's some angled surface, which is gonna have it look like a sci-fi sketch. Okay, so what's on the left side? Since this is actually on the ground plane, street level, I'm thinking that could be just the garbage dump or some sort of machinery sitting up. Just adding kind of secondary design, story cue. Maybe the player can interact with some kind of display panels and the sewer pipes. So there's a blocky TV screen or display, has under there there's a shadow, and yeah, put in the frame. So the second stage of constructing the scene is done, and now I'm going back with the straight to the line work. So tracing the shape is already there. However, there's a slight mannerism when it comes to the actual end shapes and the pointy top. Just trying to come up with a characteristic for this location. The detailing process is basically tracing over base lines. The ground has actually interesting shape design here. It's not completely flat. Some portions are lifted and maybe splitted. Possibly have a light coming through when I work on the painting. So detailing part could be a little slow process. However, this is where you actually reconfirm your design, and the key thing is try not to caught up in small shapes. And if you start breaking up the walls with too many different shapes, you start to lose as a solid structure that holds up the building. I'm adding some wire tube thing, which is always great to have some light source as it is. And also, once you start painting in the Photoshop, depends on the how dramatic lighting will be. Some of these busy details will be in subtle shadow area. So even though it looks pretty busy, I mean, it'll have a very subtle detail within the dark shadow, especially nighttime setup. Okay, so this pretty developed shot here. And now I can step back and see what area needs to be simplified by adding more bold lines in there. And definitely the crack on the ground, it would be interesting option for a modeler. And so here coming back with darker value and picking out the ones that actually should be standing out because of the how deep the shapes are sitting on each other. There's some interesting shape modeling on the left side. Definitely that overstacked TV monitor is pretty cool. Also, some of the flat wall on the right side, instead of being a complete concrete or metal, some shapes could be replaced with glass or neon plating. So later when I paint, I can have some cool display signs and the neons. Here coming back with the middle value gray, it's definitely pushing out some of the shadows, so we can suggest the light source in there. So this is pretty much how far I can get with the drawing with the marker layout. Unless I come back with the finer the point pens to get more small details, but this is a good base to scan in and then start quickly adding some color and lighting into it. Okay, here we come back with the graphite pencil again. Actually working from one of the thumbnails. The last one we did, the thumbnail had a looking down view and high vanishing point. So based on that one, I like to sketch out more like a city view. Art direction on this one is still using classical design cues from old, maybe like Asian architecture, and mix that with the fantasy elements in it. Since I'm not using marker value layouts to construct a scene, it'll be straight on from one single drawing tool. So I carefully laid out basic relationship with the buildings first, and it's almost like the train shape setup. Since the vanishing point will be on the right top, a simple one-point perspective. But as I described, even though it's a one-point perspective, depends on the height and the ground plane changes. It could be very interesting. I'm thinking between these two building row, there will be a canal. We'll be splitting these two, and there will be connecting bridge and stuff. So understanding the scale. However, I haven't indicated how big is the building on the front because I didn't put any windows or any thing that you can get a sense for the scale. But then bottom, there's a connecting bridge and the stairs. You can get a sense of how wide this canal is. And some of the building facade has pushed in, almost like the deep overhang layout, and the further out will be flat plane. So, but everything will be following the 1-point vanishing point. So here I'm thinking some interesting looking out layout, some kind of terrace or balcony. However, is built at the top of the building. So between the columns, where actually we can look have a look out towards the horizon line, you can see the background through it. Yeah, that's the rough sketch I was based off from, and so a little bit of a shading is good because you're not like straight design from non-stop, right? So whenever I put some little shading with the lines, that's when I sort of, taking a break from my non-stop designing decision you have to make. Here I'm making some of the rooftop is more curved. If I make the curve a little taller and start looking more Western architecture, the Greek pantheon kind of thing. So, well, it doesn't have any Asian architecture look, but let me see how I can mix those two. So you can see the thumbnail that they're based off from had a little sense of lighting there. You can see there's a untouched light hitting directly on the surface, the front top portion, and most of the left side is in the light. So this building I'm putting in, yeah, okay, here I'm making more like a Chinese or Korean classical roof. There's a little window hanging out there, and little small spiky end. The finishing up the bottom of the building and continuing down. So even though it's a one-point perspective, because each building is sitting in the one-point perspective, you will see the different front of the building, and between separation of the building, you always see the front side. And on the canal, I'm putting in some kind of the area the character can step on and walk around. There's no design or close look connection between the movie Fifth Element and this layout I'm doing, but I don't know, my brain is thinking about that movie. Maybe because the potential thing could happen in this vertical canal area, maybe flying taxi, or it's weird, isn't it? I mean, I'm not even thinking about sci-fi, but I'm thinking about that movie in my head. Okay, so adding windows, so give more life to each buildings. And some portion could be straight relief, some kind of abstract design. And the bottom of the window doesn't have to be flat, so it's curved down and then has a little more interesting shape. So those things that drawn pretty small. I mean, it's about like 1 inch wide, but when this goes to 3D production, that small section still needs to have a lot of more details. So as a concept artist, you can't really provide everything for an entire team. However, you should be able to redraw, re-sketch out, and making sure that small portion in your drawing is what it looks like in the actual scale. So that's like a fun part of concept art. Unconsciously, you're actually giving the framework for the entire area, and the 3D modeler or the set modeler, when they have a question, they always come to you, and whether you have to provide them a reference image or actual re-sketching the small section into bigger scale. Otherwise, a lot of shapes could be left in a question, and it's up to 3D modelers to figure out what this looks like. But the production that I've been always work with, they always have the concept artist has to decide what those are, and I think that's even better for the production, because that way it's like it's coming from one person's vision, and not all the 3D artists have ability to figure out the blank area in the from the concept. So here, right side, just suggesting what could be sitting in that particular area. I mean, I think there's some interesting thing there. Some structures doesn't make sense in there, but however, it's just throwing out different ideas. Again, it's a flat canal, but having bridge going across would be simple, another option. But the sum of the shape could be more like a round platform, almost like the rotunda is actually floating in the water. That could be good design cue. And then different steps, the wide stairs coming down, and then actually the entrance is already set in. So simple shape in there, but try to offer as much as different scenario in there. And here, working on the left side, a lot of times what's defining the architecture style is not the front design of the architecture. Is mostly the base and more like a simple the foundation structure. So that's where you have to pay attention, because a lot of times if you don't think about it, you end up putting just a simple cube or a cylinder and not thinking what kind of trim they could have. So continue on. I'm adding this round base just to break up. I mean, there's a long, like, how I imagine this is you have a Canal City on the right side, but however, the main focus is on the left top, where there's a priest or some superpower, some main character guys. They're having like a conference or some serious gathering there, and then they can walk out this long pathway reaching out to the lookout point. So that could be a good camera track scenario. So those are a couple of things I'm thinking in my head. Okay, it's different treatment of the top roof. So going back to drawing training, I think I learned the most from perspective class. The class that I took, the final was drawing the city in 3-point perspective, and I learned so much about because unless someone gives you as an assignment as a final, you don't really attempt to lay out the skyscrapers, right? Entire cityscape. But then that assignment actually taught me it could be done, it can be done, and put a little bit of confidence in myself, and also I felt comfortable. And besides that, just layout sketches, I didn't really practice so much until I started working for a game company. Because the first job I had was a storyboard, and my storyboard had pretty detailed background. And I remember it was the battle, the combat, the cinematic shot from Parasite Eve, where fighter jets are attacking this slimy creature that size of King Kong. And I ended up putting like buildings in the street shots, and it looks like more like a layout sketch rather than storyboard. So because I liked working on those, and obviously it shows on your work what you like, right? And then one of the designer, he looked at it and he asked me if I wanted to do some environment concept. So that's the first time I started doing the background concept. So that game, the Parasite Eve, had a pretty detailed background, especially the NYPD and the New York Museum shot, Natural History Museum. And all the maps are first had to hand drawn and get approved, and then we make 3D models and had to touch up in Photoshop. So it's a pretty old technique. However, getting the right layout drawing is first thing, has to be approved. So putting the right props in the correct scale and just overall detailing of the interior and exterior was a very good training for me. Okay, here I'm almost finishing up. Definitely, you can tell from marker and this pencil sketch. Pencil sketch has more old classical look. It's more has wider appeal. I mean, it could be old classical fantasy, or if I make it into sci-fi, it could be sci-fi. However, marker has different look. I think it has to do with line, the treatment, how the line starts and ends, and how it does create this drafting kind of look, more like industrial rendering. So that's interesting, very subtle difference, but I notice it, and that's why I like to go back and forth with different two different mediums. So here it is, from the rough sketch to the final. Okay, here I'd like to try something more fun. Thinking post-apocalyptic, space marine, kind of first-person shooter, kind of quick layout, rundown, industrial, military overhang, like a corridor, and you see the explosion in the background, that sort of thing. So here, I'm just going at it, light marker again, but just seeing it on, because this the same thing is 1 point perspective, but you don't see the left side because the vanishing point is almost touching the end, and just try to test myself, see if I can come up with a unique, different sci-fi design. So I'm just putting more odd shapes next to each other. Nothing is straight, solid bar. And some straight wall panel could have a machine and some kind of a control panel is actually mounted on the wall. So this is a quick way to just lay out some of the design options. And still try to make it interesting as you're looking from the inside to the outside, and between the open space you will see the sky or the building standing further away. So getting the cracks and some wiring, and well, actually also I'm drawing on the marker pad this time, which is has a lot more smooth, and the ink stays longer, the wet, and it's got a soft bleeding edge. So here I'm getting the basic shape done, and then coming back with a darker value and just popping up what it'll be like to have a darker shadow in some area. Actually, I'm quite surprised with myself how much drawing I've done within this recording time. So I guess the whole time I'm at work, I've been pretty lazy because your camera is rolling, and you have one shot deal, and it's not trying to do the best work. It's more like instead of that, you just try to do your best. Does it make sense? So I end up just doing more work because I had to work fast to get my idea down, especially drawings. I think the process, because I know all the drawings will be scanned and somehow it has to be retouched before you show it to anyone. So I developed this the pattern. When I draw, I just the mistakes are mistakes. Nothing will be perfect. So that's why I end up being a pretty fast drawing person. However, I don't think that's the best way to work in every cases. So here I'm just going with the flow, adding some interesting shapes and overlapping pipes, some cool sci-fi detailing. So I'm writing down a couple keywords. This is a design challenge, non-repeating shapes, harmony. So I guess without repeating same shapes, just stuff it with different designs, and still, can you make it cohesive? Can you make sense out of this abstract designs? So still, the area I'm drawing right now, that's a flat wall this good portion of it will be transparent see-through glass. So again, going over initial marking, the shape that I laid out in the first two paths, and just confirming the final lines and shapes. Stuff like this, I think the same thing. If you know how to use 3D, you can sketching it in 3D. And the good thing about 3D modeling is you make one section and you can copy and paste and populate it throughout the scene. So you can quickly provide different options. Where drawing is, unless you redraw the whole thing, is only one option. I mean, you can copy and paste in Photoshop and do some plain distortion and try to make it like it's attached to each other. But however, it's not going to have accurate connecting as modeling. So top portion has it's kind of rib cage, kind of curved overhang. Whether that's see-through or actually thick glass, it'll be pretty interesting. Okay, here finishing up the left side. That's where actually the character or the grunt will come in with the weapon. And the background building could be a little more interesting. However, just push the scale of it. I just put simple straight building, has a little interesting window shape. This one has maybe this is like alien territory. You don't recognize familiar modern architecture in these couple buildings in the background. So non-repeating shapes, if I can somehow relate that abstract shape with some of the natural form, in this case more like a bone or kind of rock shapes. Again, it's always fun to add details on kind of exposed the machine part, so you can add like tons of cables and splitting out parts. Okay, I'm putting details on the far buildings. That one has a little more sketching out this little tank kind of shape. The things could be in the background, explosions, smokes coming out. So, I mean, I have worked on the classical Greek environment for many years. Also, right there, I made a mistake. I should have gone over with a marker like that because I forgot this was a marker pad. And the sci-fi is something I always wanted to jump into. And unless you try something, you don't know how good you are. And I realize I need to know a lot more before I jump into creating this my own design. Because one thing I noticed from this is, his idea would be pushing the shape into more organic shapes. However, it doesn't read as industrial sci-fi framework, and it gets pretty busy in the center. I mean, I'll be editing it in the Photoshop. So here, I'm quickly trying to sketch out some kind of flying object. Same approach, light marker, just adding some framework, very sketchy. Try to keep it in the simple cocoon shape form. So its design is not much pushed out. It's got a little bit of a bug, kind of insect kind of feel to it. So coming back with a darker value again. Adding the contour on the surface. So, it's not for final design, but I also checking to see if that contour makes sense to me. So it's got pretty interesting shell covering at the top, and right side has a little arm thing. And then coming back with the shading. So challenging part is like how this could be fitting into the sci-fi layout I just sketched before this one. So this bug looking flying object. So from this DVD, it's not really saying that I'm better or anything. Just part of my history as an artist. Something is worth going back and share with you guys. And definitely there's more mistakes than successful process. However, putting it out to the table and you can look at it, how I do it, and I hope you guys learn something good from this watching DVDs. Okay, here is almost done. Wrapping it up. Again, it'll be necessary to draw top, bottom, and also the front before we even get this approved, because I have a feeling that this side arm thing needs to be a little bigger or a little closer to the actual body, because it's not really unclear what it's doing. Is it helping the flight maneuver, or actually is using as a weapon? So the guy sketching for size comparison. Okay, here it is. So here I'm sketching out the side profile to re-examine if there could be any improvement in the design. So especially proportion and the placement of the main parts. So this is it, and thanks for watching DVDs, and continue on part 2. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Cecil Kim. In this tutorial DVD, I'm going to walk you through different examples of environment concept sketches that are created for game production. So range from high-level building concept to street-level concept, and also vista shot of a city environment. Each sketch takes about 30 minutes to 1 hour, and this is how I usually create the quick sketches at work. So let's get it started.